Energy prices are spiking across the United States, climbing at more than twice the pace of inflation. Over the past 12 months, the Consumer Price Index rose 2.7%, but energy bills surged by over 5.5%. Nearly 60 utilities nationwide are preparing to raise rates in 2025, a move that could extract an additional $38 billion from electricity users and another $3.5 billion from natural gas customers. For households already stretched by rising food and housing costs, the impact is immediate and unavoidable. The surge is being driven not just by global volatility, but by America's own transformation. Data centers powering artificial intelligence, the rapid adoption of electric vehicles, and the electrification of everyday life are consuming power at a pace unseen in decades. We've never seen energy demand at this level, one industry executive admitted. Artificial intelligence alone is driving a wave of electricity use no one predicted 5 years ago. Yet, at this very moment of rising demand, the US grid is buckling under strain. Aging infrastructure, soaring turbine costs, and extended coal plant lifetimes are creating what experts call a paradox of power. Trump's tariffs, designed to bring factories back home, are raising the cost of the very energy those factories need. Imports of transformers, turbines, and key electrical components are hit with new levies. Coal plants, once slated for closure, are being revived, but coal is now more expensive than natural gas or renewables. Regulators warn that extending their lifespans will only raise costs for consumers. The problem is structural. Trump's vision of Made in America manufacturing requires cheap and reliable power. Instead, tariffs on steel, aluminum, and energy infrastructure are pushing costs higher. Families are paying more for their light bills. Industries are absorbing higher input prices. And the foundation of Trump's economic promise, an American resurgence built on energy, looks more fragile than ever. The tension in Trump's strategy became clearer after his phone call with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, a conversation Ottawa described as wide-ranging, but Washington offered no details on. The timing was impossible to ignore. As the United States scrambles to stabilize its energy supply, Canada holds much of what Trump needs to make his vision work. Canada is not just another neighbor. It already supplies over 4 million barrels of oil per day, more than 8 billion cubic feet of natural gas daily, and accounts for over 80% of US electricity imports. Nearly a quarter of the uranium fueling America's nuclear plants is Canadian. On top of that, British Columbia alone hosts 16 types of critical minerals essential for semiconductors, solar panels, and electric vehicles. These are not marginal figures. They are the backbone of North America's energy security. Carney's government is moving fast. Ottawa has unveiled a sweeping plan to transform Canada into an energy superpower, positioning itself as the global supplier of choice outside China and Russia. Parliament has approved billions in funding for infrastructure to connect mines to rail and ports, streamlining the flow of resources into US and global markets. At the same time, Canada is scaling up solar, wind, hydrogen, and next-generation nuclear energy, while branding its oil and gas exports as the lowest emission in the world. The contrast with Washington is striking. While Trump leans on tariffs and coal plant extensions, Canada is investing in the long-term resilience of its grid and resource exports. In practice, this means American consumers are being squeezed by rising utility bills, while Canadian companies are attracting capital and positioning themselves as indispensable to future supply chains. The quiet phone call between Trump and Carney may have been diplomatic on the surface, but the subtext was hard to miss. If Trump wants to power America's manufacturing revival, he needs Canada more than Canada needs him, and that shift in leverage could define the next phase of North American trade. But the tariff story doesn't end with energy. On August 1st, Trump expanded tariffs on over 70 countries, a sweeping move aimed at forcing jobs back to the United States. The results were immediate. General Motors reported $1.1 billion in tariff-related losses in the second quarter alone. Ford followed with $800 million in hits. Stanley Black & Decker, a cornerstone of U.S. manufacturing, projected an $800 million shortfall for the year. Apple budgeted more than $1 billion in tariff costs in just one quarter. Retailers like Walmart and Best Buy are already passing costs onto consumers. Shampoo, shoes, electronics, all are creeping upward in price. Reuters tracked explicit price hikes tied directly to tariffs, and economists warn the full effect hasn't even hit yet. For American families, the pinch is becoming harder to ignore. One Detroit auto supplier admitted he would be forced to lay off employees and close a warehouse. Another importer who sourced goods from India said tariffs had turned every cost-saving move into a dead end. Everywhere we turn, we're hitting roadblocks, he said. Even daily essentials are vulnerable. The US imports about a third of its coffee from Brazil, now hit with a 50% tariff. Analysts estimate every cup could climb by 20 to 25 cents, a shift that could redefine consumer habits. North of the border, the picture is different but equally dramatic. Canada was hit with a 35% tariff on goods not covered by USMCA: steel, aluminum, lumber, auto parts. Statistics: Canada reported a 13% drop in total exports in the second quarter, with energy exports plunging nearly 20%. Alberta bore the brunt, but instead of retaliation, Carney is repositioning. Canada is diversifying trade ties, expanding with Mexico, and investing in resilience at home. The difference is stark. Trump fuels instability to pressure partners. Carney builds endurance to survive it. If tariffs on cars, steel, and coffee weren't disruptive enough, Trump shocked global markets again in early August 2025 by slapping a 39% tariff on imported gold bars. Switzerland, the world's largest gold refining hub, was hit head-on. Until then, traders assumed bullion would be exempt. Within hours of the announcement, shipments halted. US gold prices jumped above European levels, creating an arbitrage gap and freezing international trade. For Switzerland, it was a blow to one of its most prized industries. For Canada, it was a warning. Gold may not be a dominant Canadian export to the US, but the precedent was chilling. If gold can be pulled into Trump's tariff war, so can strategic minerals, energy, or high-value manufacturing. Ottawa quickly recognized the lesson. No commodity, however entrenched, is safe from being weaponized under Trump's trade strategy. The gold tariff also revealed how quickly decades-old trade flows could collapse with a single customs enforcement letter. In January 2025, U.S. imports of gold surged to 43 metric tons as traders rushed to front-load shipments. By August, the flow stopped overnight. The global supply chain was ruptured. Canada's response has been measured but deliberate. Carney has avoided knee-jerk escalation, instead doubling down on diversification and diplomacy. While Ontario Premier Doug Ford publicly condemned Trump's tactics, Ottawa quietly expanded ties with Mexico, the EU, and the UK. The message was clear: Canada won't fold, but it also won't be provoked into self-defeating retaliation. This is the deeper contest unfolding. Trump thrives on surprise and escalation. Carney counters with preparation and restraint. In the battle of endurance, Canada is signaling it has both the patience and the leverage to withstand shocks, even as Washington aims to unsettle. By the end of summer 2025, steel and aluminum tariffs reached 50%, striking at the heart of Canada's role in North America's auto supply chain. For Canadian exporters, it was devastating. Auto parts exports to the US plunged 25 to 35%, depending on the company. Some firms saw orders evaporate, not because of tariffs themselves, but because uncertainty froze contracts. In Toronto, Conquest Steel reported losing its US customers almost overnight. But the pain doesn't stop at the Canadian border. Detroit is bleeding too. Ford's F-Series, the #1 American vehicle, relies heavily on Quebec aluminum. Industry estimates suggest tariffs could add up to $9,000 per vehicle in some cases. US automakers can't easily replace Canadian supply. The shock is flowing straight into American assembly lines. This is the paradox of Trump's approach. By targeting Canadian steel to project strength, he is undercutting America's own auto industry. While Canadian exporters pivot inward and diversify, U.S. carmakers are left with no quick alternative. And looming above all this is USMCA. The deal, not meant for review until 2026, is already being dragged into tariff politics. Washington accuses Canada of undermining the pact by retaliating. Ottawa insists it is defending sovereignty. If Trump forces an early reopening, North America's most important trade framework could fracture years ahead of schedule. Carney's strategy remains one of strategic patience. Ottawa is building shields, expanding non-U.S. trade alliances, boosting rules of origin compliance, and leveraging Canada's dominance in energy and minerals. In a continent where Trump uses tariffs as weapons, Canada is betting on endurance, alliances, and structural power. The outcome is still uncertain, but one reality is clear. Every escalation intended to pressure Canada is increasingly pressuring America itself. From energy bills to car prices, the tariff war is revealing not just who can impose costs, but who can withstand them. And in that contest, Canada may prove stronger than expected.